Hi everyone, I'm Rod Middleton. I'm the Chief Investigator of the UK MS Register based at Swansea University, and we've been receiving lots of questions from you asking how do we manage your data that we capture via the UK MS Register. So I'm going to try and do that on this presentation. So how do we manage and allow access to your data? I just want to talk about the data flow. Whether you give consent at your NHS hospital or you agree to the terms of service via the website, the data portal, the way we are allowed to manage and work with that data is really important, and we're quite constrained and quite prescriptive about how we do that and the security. So you give informed consent via your NHS site, which is countersigned by your clinician, or you agree to our terms of service, or the best case, you do both of these things. This is what we then do with this data. So the data flow looks like this. We are bound by a bunch of laws, restrictions, and regulations that we ensure that we adhere to every aspect of the research process. So first and foremost, we have National Research Ethics Service approval to capture your data and to work with the NHS and to have your identity as we work with that data. We have research governance sponsorship from Swansea University, which allows us to maintain and have access to that. We are bound by the General Data Protection Regulation, a European law that you're all very familiar with, but it's very clear on how we can work with, how we contact you, how long we're able to store it, the permissions or the use of that data going forward, and then the UK Data Protection Act, which is very similar to the GDPR and allows us to maintain a working relationship with Europe, but that's the point of the law. So that's the law and legal framework in which we work. However you agree or consent to have your data shared with us, that data is securely transmitted to us to a research database in Swansea. Now, I want to zoom in a little bit on that research database in Swansea and be really explicit about how we work with that data. Effectively, we separate your data into two different parts. There's the identifiable part, or the demographics, and that's things like your postcode, your NHS number, your surname, your forename, and where you live. And we anonymize that data. And by anonymizing it, I mean we remove that date of birth. It becomes a year of birth, or sometimes a week of birth. Your name is completely stripped out of it. Your location is abstracted up to such a high level that if you're in a very sparsely populated part of the UK, such as the Orkney Islands, for example, we don't go down to the island, we go down to the county, and if it's still sparsely populated, we come up from that. So it gives you an idea of your location without actually giving your exact location on a map. That is the identifiable side of it, and we don't even work with that data, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And then the other half of your information, your clinical or your questionnaire responses, we also look for identity. So some of that data has free text within it. We parse that for free text and remove that, anything identifiable. If, for example, you've said Dr. Jones is removed from that data as well. And then those data are joined back together, the anonymous data set and the parsed free text information, parsed other response information, and added to an anonymized MS registered data set. And that is the data set that we even work with. We only keep your identity for getting back in touch with you, to inform that questionnaires are available, or to invite you to be part of research if that's what you've given as part of your options for signing up when you signed up to the MS Register. That anonymized MS register dataset, I want to zoom in a little bit more now because I want to talk about the governance and data management of your data. So what happens when another researcher wants to have access to your UK MS register data? Well, there's a process for that too. They complete an access request process, and that form that they fill in, or a number of forms that they fill in, goes to the UK MS Register Scientific Steering Committee. That's a committee made up of neurologists, people with MS, representatives from the MS Society, and a couple of representatives from the UK MS Register as well. Although we don't get a vote on incoming research, it's entirely bound by the Scientific Steering Committee, and they're looking for things like how interesting the research is, do the researchers have ethics, is it of good scientific standing, things like that to make sure. And has something like that been asked before? Should they approve that, and not all studies are approved, then some checks are carried out on the researcher. And some of these are done before it even gets to the point of the committee, but it's just to be explicit about this. They are not allowed to be a representative of a for-profit organisation, so pharmaceutical industry or the insurance industry. They've completed Medical Research Council Safe Researcher training. They're a bona fide researcher at a university or an NHS hospital. They have a CV, a recent CV with evidence of publication, therefore they can do the work that we expect them to be able to do so. And they're trained in the use of our secure e-research platform. More on that in a second. We also ensure that appropriate software and authentication software is installed on their devices to give them secured access to the anonymized isolated research dataset. At that point, a project-specific data set is deployed. So only the data that they need to carry out the research that they've passed through the SSC, the Scientific Steering Committee, is deployed to our security research platform. That is maintained at an international standard, 27001 in this case, which is an international standard for how you govern and secure access to data. We then give the researcher secure two-factor authenticated access to that specific data set, and only that specific data set, for a given period of time for the purposes of the project, and then they can get on and they can do their research. Data out from this platform is only ever anonymized and never ever at a line level for these researchers. It's aggregated data, and what I mean by aggregated is that it's got to be in counts of more than 5, so it's not identifiable. That's parsed by human beings at the UKMS Register as well to make sure there's nothing identifiable within it, and what they're asking out agrees to those standards. It's within line of the project they've been part of, and that it's aggregate data only. And that's how we work. Thank you very much.